Hello, everyone. Welcome to In Full View, focusing on trans masks in media, the podcast where we shine a light on the lack of trans masculine representation in entertainment. We're your hosts, Avi
And Yas Kasiri.
and today we are talking about representation, equity, and support for trans mask actors.
Yes. So obviously, we've talked a lot about representation on the podcast in the sense of what we would like to see. And I think we have talked about the idea of like what do we get from representation? Because it might be a question of like, well, what's the end goal? What do we hope besides I guess besides feeling more seen and more
Right.
hopeful and getting work for ourselves? What are we actually asking for when it comes to representation? I feel like we could start with the quality versus quantity. Because a big
Mm,
thing we've talked about is there's just not a lot of transmasculine representation, but especially if you've seen Disclosure, you know that not all representation is good representation. And so I think that's something when we're asking and pushing for more representation, it's an idea of like, what does it mean to have good representation? And I think that might be even a question I would pose for you, for both of us, is that fine line of what do we mean by good trans representation? Because I know I don't think we're saying, especially based on our last episode with AJ, we're not asking for trans people to be saintly or to have zero flaws. But there is a reality that the only way that some people are ever going to meet an out trans person is through TV or a book or film or even music. So I think this idea of like, what do we feel like would be quality representation?
mm. The first thing that kind of popped into my head, but then I might backtrack on that, but
Mm,
representation that is not pandering.
mm,
Like I think sometimes I have this chip on my shoulder when it's anything that feels very like we're the device, we're the tool, we're the teaching moment to educate, which is not a bad thing because then this is where I'm gonna like maybe retract that. Is like I'm starting to maybe radically accept that that's where we're at and that like maybe it's like as much as I want to steer away from stereotypes or tokenism, what if that's just where we're at right now in this journey and process to get to the other side where it's not that? Because you think about how that has happened over time with many minorities
yeah.
um, and marginalized groups of people. But I don't know, representation that's not always like spoon feeding
Yeah.
you
I think you,
about being
mm,
trans.
yeah. I think you bring up like a good point of, I like to have two, like, again, split thoughts on it. Is one, the educational aspect of like, as AJ put it in the last episode, like, I'm not your Google, right? But the idea of making content that teaches people about trans maskness, because I think a lot of times whenever we frame the question of is this film or character, book or etc., is it teaching cis people something? But we've actually never talked about like, is it teaching trans people something? Because outside of like entertainment, right? A lot of people like trans masks when they like start transitioning and looking into medical options, if that's what they want, and they look into bottom surgery, a lot of people think there's only one option and it's phallo. A lot of trans mask people like have no idea that metoidioplasty is also an option for them, and that could be something that a lot of people, like when I've mentioned it to some people, they're like, oh yeah, that sounds like something I'd want, because there's a lot of intimidating aspects of phallo, right? It's like a really long process, the scars, which nothing wrong with those if that's what you want. But there is an element of, as trans masks, there, because there's not a lot of representation about of us, especially if people aren't maybe social media users, or I know like, I feel like it's like maybe millennials were the social media users now. It, because you have older people who don't go on social, and then like younger people are really trying to do a digital detox.
Mm,
but they still know how to use social to go find people.
mm-hmm.
But there might be an element of just people don't like, are we create we're not we've I feel like we haven't really talked about that in the sense of creating educational content for trans audiences versus it's always about educating cis people, but trans people are also, it's not like we magically know everything about being trans as soon as we decide to like transition.
I think that's great, right? Asking the question, who is this for?
Mhm.
And oftentimes it does skew towards being for the benefit of a cis person. Um, and it's right, not like benefiting trans masc people or trans people in general. Because you're right, it seems like a mystery sometimes
Yeah.
of like, what are your options? What can you do? Or
Mhm.
like, just like, you don't have to do those things either. Like, I get
Yeah.
that.
Because there could be a moment, like, I feel like there's always like the "what bathroom do I go into" moment
Mm,
to show cis people how difficult that is. And I'm sure there's also trans people who are like, "I feel that way too. I'm not alone." But the conversation could shift to someone being like, "Hey, you shouldn't wear your binder for more than X amount of hours. Like, I know it sucks,
totally.
but you need to like take care of your health."
Yes. I love that you just said that because I just finished recording an audiobook and it literally talks about one of the main characters being at a boy's house and he's a trans mask character and he wears a binder and he's nervous about taking his binder off at this boy's house, but because he's like, I don't want to sleep with it on because I've done that before
Mhm.
and I will never do that again. And I actually, it's not healthy.
Yeah.
But it's stuff like that. Like, I mean, again, right? Like, talk about books and the ways we might get that. Those stories might be more prevalent in
Mhm.
other, like, other media formats. But when we're talking about TV and film, my goodness, that's lacking
Oh,
and
yeah.
non existent, really.
Yeah, for sure. And that's which is exciting that we do have an author coming up later in the
Mm-hmm.
season. All goes well, you know?
Yes, I think things will go well.
Yes, just in case, because this is
Just in
now on
case.
record. But I am really excited to hear more about the world of books because there's just, I feel like I've even cishet friends, they've been like, yeah, I was reading this sci-fi book and they're like, there's every gender, every sexuality in it. And it's just like, I feel like sometimes books really get to have more fun and with the representation. But the other thing you brought up with the pandering thing, I thought was interesting. I'm gonna do something maybe it's a little risky, and I'll take it for myself. But a small critique I have heard, for the record, I have not watched Stranger Things all the way through, but there's a episode in the last season that came out where one of the characters, I think it's Will, comes out as gay and it got review bombed, right? And of course, immediately people were like, people are being homophobic. They're like attacking it because they want to bring down the score. I love going through Facebook comments because they tend to skew like more conservative. It's not in my world. Tons of people were posting, like, commenting, like, that wasn't the problem. The problem was the writing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it was like a 10-minute scene that felt very like my friends who are queer, they watched it and they were like, "Oh," like they were like, you could tell there was not a queer person in that room.
Right.
And there was something I didn't watch it, but something like we both like Milk Duds. We're both the same, kind of like this pandering thing. And like, granted, it
Yeah.
takes place in the '80s, so it is a different like era.
Right.
People have different reactions, and they probably want to be mindful of having something that's period in front of a modern audience, which can be a pretty challenging balance. But also,
Right.
I'm like, haven't these kids been going to like other dimensions and finding monsters and stuff? Like, I feel like them a kid coming out as gay, like,
Right.
especially because I think Maya Hawke's character was queer on it. I think
Yes.
so.
Yes.
They've already
That is
had
correct.
a queer person. At least some of them knew she was queer. Again, I'm not caught up. This isn't a dig. And if anything, it's not my opinion. I'm just regurgitating information I've heard.
Of course. I did see it. We're all caught up.
Hmm.
So we went to the theater actually to go see
Oh,
the
fun.
final episode for Stranger Things. And I understand that critique or that feedback and that comment. I think I also, and my wife does too, we had issues with the writing as a whole
Hmm.
with this season. But I'd love to fact check. Like, we should see, like, really who are the writers in the
Yeah.
room? Because we can't assume,
Mm.
but I do see why someone would take away that kind of idea around like there was no queer person that wrote that. It felt very superficial, very like you were saying, like, I like milk duds, you like milk duds. We're not different. We're the same. Like that very PBS kind of like
Oh,
storytelling.
PBS, may they rest in peace.
Or
Yeah.
not PBS, but like very like kids,
Yeah.
programming. So I get that. But
Right.
yes,
Which,
that does speak on the way we pander to our audience.
yeah.
Um,
And what's interesting, and again, yes, I'm sure there's somebody screaming at their phone being like, this was the writer on it. They were queer. Like,
right,
podcasts don't have the facts completely correct. But I think that's also goes to talk like again the reason why there's no shade or anything towards the creative team is that like it's a Netflix thing. It goes through layers and layers of like reviews and who approves what. So maybe there could have been like a suit who was like, nah, we should like lean into it more. And they could have come from a great place, like they're 5-year-olds exploring something. They're like, we need to make it more sweet. Like,
right,
but however it got there was pandering and it didn't resonate with queer or non-queer audiences.
right, right. So it missed the mark a little bit, even
Yeah.
if there were good intentions.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
get that. I get that.
So I think that kind of goes into like, yeah, what you're saying about like the pandering. It's like who's it pandering towards? And I know we've talked about this a couple of times, but I think if it comes back to like a good story and we're not using like a queer person or a trans mass person for this idea of like, maybe it's like symbolic, like checking a box, like, oh,
Mm,
we have the trans person now in the show. We've
mm.
checked a box versus is this a strong step towards changing the systemic
Landscape, systemic,
I was like, what's
yes.
the word? The systemic problem of not having good trans representation or enough trans representation, especially trans mask representation.
Right, right. And is that now this answers our quantity versus quality?
Hmm.
And what about visibility versus impact?
Yeah, I think that would probably also tie in a little bit with that. But then getting back to disclosure, where you can have people who are visible, but it may not have the impact you're hoping it would. Because I guess I bring up a lot of like studies on this podcast, but one study I was looking at is called Can TV Shows Promote Acceptance of Sexual and Ethnic Minorities? A Literature Review of Television Effects on Diversity Attitudes by, oh no.
Barstas G. Zerbecki?
Yeah, that sounds good. We apologize to the author if and the researcher if we mispronounced. But
We're
something
gonna get canceled.
we're gonna get
Okay,
canceled.
we need to do better.
I know
We
we
need
gotta
to do
start.
better. Okay, go ahead.
So there's a few things that came out of that study I thought was interesting, and it one of the definitions I found or the concepts I found interesting in this study was the social cognitive theory, which is audiences learn behaviors by observing how characters interact and which actions are rewarded or punished on screen.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I like that.
Yeah, and I think that's the visibility versus impact because one of the things I think about is Ace Ventura.
Oh, yeah.
And content warning, transphobia. And this was a trans woman played by a cis woman. And basically, Ace Ventura, pet detective, she's this cop who's this attractive woman who uses like her sexuality to get what she wants. And then she's outed as this male football player who had a vendetta. And the reaction that they had was like the vomiting. Everyone, like all the men,
Mm-hmm.
kept vomiting because they had been with a trans woman without knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And not to keep referencing disclosure, but they did find that there was like a series of films that all had that reaction I don't think
Mm,
Ace Ventura was the first one. I can't remember. Go watch the documentary.
right. Which, let's name that disclosure, is a documentary available to watch on Netflix.
It was last time I watched it.
It
Yeah.
was. Okay. That's when I watched it too. I just want to make sure
Mm,
just because we're just saying disclosure
that's
and it's
true.
like
Yes.
maybe people don't know what that is, or it's always cool to let folks know like if they're interested in watching it too where they can find
Yes,
that,
that's a
but
good
it
call
is.
out. It's and it
Yeah.
looks specifically at trans representation in media.
Yeah.
And finally enough, the name being disclosure, that moment of Ace Ventura for like this comedy effect, it's teaching people how to react to
Yes.
trans women as a sexual partner, and then also gets into the issue of disclosure. She did not disclose that she was trans before having a sexual encounter with somebody, and there's a lot of entitlement that comes from like cis men, right? If they find, and like that's how a lot of
Right.
trans women, especially of color, are, you know,
Mhm.
attacked and murdered, is because of this whole
Mhm.
thing. And so I think there's this thing of like, I almost would argue like no representation might be better than bad representation. Because speaking of
Sure.
like, trans mass representation, like the early one was Max on the L Word, right? Where he's like T raging constantly and
Right.
like the whole personality changing. And okay, this is my big theory on Max. Spoiler if you haven't watched all of the original L Word. So the last season of the L Word is a who done it. They're literally trying to figure out who
Mhm.
murdered Jenny. I
Mhm.
think it okay, this isn't a spoiler because they never like say who. I think it was Max. And I think they didn't want
Mhm.
to name it because he was the only trans character on the show. Because if
Interesting.
you watch all of the interviews, he is the like only one that has anything nice to say about Jenny. Everybody is honest that she wasn't a great person. He's not honest about it, and he suffered the most from her, and a lot of it was around dysphoria related stuff of like he's with a gay man, he gets pregnant, and she's really trying to lean into like this is a great thing, celebrating the pregnancy, like pushing him into this dysphoria.
Mm.
I think based on some of the clues, I think Max did it, and they didn't want to be like the trans guy did it.
Right. You mean like the creators and the
I think
writers of
so.
the
I think
show didn't want to make that a plot point.
yes, I think they didn't want to like say because I'm pretty sure we end not knowing who killed Jenny, or they're like they rule it's an accident. Like it's been a while since
Mm.
I saw it, but I think it was gonna be Max.
I
Yeah.
see. And what do you think then that was teaching an audience? Or did it really like Max as a character
Hmm.
on the L Word was teaching the audience what on to how to react, relate, or respond to a trans man or a trans masculine person?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of, and I'm not saying this wasn't like a real experience for trans men at the time or even now, but there was a lot of them giving him a lot of pushback on. I remember there was a line where, because he was trying to raise money for top surgery and then he ends up not wanting top surgery. I'm guessing because at the time the actor wasn't getting top surgery, and which is fair. But there was this whole thing of like Beth's sister, I can't remember her name, says like you're giving up the best thing in the world, and Max is like, "What, my tits?" And she says, "No, being a woman." Yeah,
Ah,
and then somebody I think gets diagnosed with breast cancer, I think, and then it becomes a you want to get rid of your breasts and she has breast cancer, like how that's so insensitive. Like they just kept making everything he was doing about his
right.
transition like supporting the patriarchy and an affront to womanhood.
Right.
Like that, yeah,
Interesting.
that was the reaction. And I do know
Mhm.
there's an episode where he's at a job and a coworker who's a woman is trying to claim sexism, and he backs her because when he interviewed a female presenting, he didn't get the job and it was treated differently. And she like kind of takes his help, but then doesn't want it because he's trans and she's like transphobe. But like it's a thing which isn't a more interesting, nuanced thing. But I will say there was kind of almost and I don't know if that's necessarily teaching trans people, but it could have been teaching queer women to view trans men as abandoning the community, which is
Wow.
what I
Yeah.
was told. Like when I was first identifying as non-binary,
Oh,
there's people. Yeah, I used to do YouTube stuff,
right.
and people were like, "We need our strong butch women. Like you need to stay for us. You like by not transitioning or just using they them pronouns, you're showing that women can be other things."
Whoa.
Yeah,
Wow. 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 Social cognitive theory in action.
yeah. I think yeah, in a
Of
way, yeah, right.
in a way of just like where did they learn that? Like where was that coming from, right?
Hmm.
Like you're taught that somewhere or you see that somewhere or you hear that somewhere.
Yeah.
For that to color and influence then how you're leading your life and treating other people. Wow.
Hmm.
That's wild.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, luckily, like my actual like people in my life were not necessarily like that
Of
I can
course, you
recall.
had
But
support.
yeah, but those same people, especially if they're in the queer community, might know people who are transitioning, and then that's a face to face thing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. That's and also in this article though, there was another thing that I think we were flagging, which is something called cultivation theory.
yeah,
And I'll read that one. It says cultivation theory, long-term exposure to certain media narratives shapes how audiences perceive reality, often aligning with what they see repeatedly on screen.
hmm,
That's another good one.
yeah, yeah. Which is I know this. I know the article too in our podcast is about like entertainment, but I immediately also thought of the news circuit, right?
Yes, politics. How could we not
Yeah,
be like politics, media, like it's all
yeah.
connected and correlated. It relates. Of course it does. It influences each other.
Yeah, and I think that cultivation theory is an argument for quantity, right? Because if they just see one trans mask, like I think the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina did like a really great job with that trans masculine character Theo. I know the actor who's non-binary was involved as well with like helping them shape the character, which is awesome. Great, where's the next one, right? That's one
Mm,
show that someone's like sees, and maybe they're in, if they like that show, maybe they like Pretty Little Liars, and Original Sin has the trans masked character as well. He's
mm-hmm.
smaller on it. I only watched season one. I really liked it. I there's so much out there to watch,
Yeah.
but that's like two. Okay, so where's the next one? And that was those were both several years ago. I think like pre-pandemic, both of them.
Oh, yeah. But we know that the numbers are there, how it has declined. It's not on a
Mhm.
rise anymore. It's reducing significantly that any kind of LGBTQIA plus representation in the media. But yeah, I like that because it makes me think of the first. Remember that conversation? I think it was with Brian, maybe, of just like, what good is it really doing when it's just like, and we did it.
Yeah.
Check the box. There we go. There we are. We have the one trans person, and even then, they're not a lead. They're
Mhm.
not the focus of a show, carrying a show, right? Like it's interesting though that I would agree with this cultivation theory. Like I can see the benefit. I would see the impact if it's reoccurring, and more than one maybe. My goodness,
Yeah,
in an episode or in a film,
right.
you know. So
Yeah,
oh
and I
man,
think
yeah,
the more like especially if you're like you see a trans mask either character and or actor, because the actor may be playing a cis person for all we know, or it just doesn't come up in
yeah.
a horror movie like that. Is it The Evil Dead?
Yes, the Evil Dead Rises.
Mhm.
I think Evil Dead Rise. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Then you see us in horror, then you like pop over and see Brian Michael Smith on a procedural, and then you pop over and you see Petey Gibson on another procedural, and then you're like, okay, great, we're in like firefighters, crime fighters, horror. Then you see like they go on a date and they're like a recurring guest star for a few episodes, like, and then you start like seeing so many different types of people who happen to be trans
Mm-hmm.
mask, and then you start
Mm-hmm.
realizing they're like we're everywhere. It's like
Yes. And we're different.
Yeah.
So different. Brings us back to what? We're not a monolith.
Hmm.
I agree with that. I like that one, cultivation
I
theory.
liked it
It's
too.
just, yeah, how do we get people to do that, right? It's like always like what is the solution? Like how are we bridging the gap? Where is the support? Where is the
Hmm.
resources, the tools? What is the game plan?
Right.
Um I know it's always that.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into the other two words of this episode. So we have like the representation we talked about. How do we get there? We need the support so we make things equitable. And this is actually a term someone else told me called the trans tax. We may have mentioned it on the podcast episode or a podcast episode before. Wow.
Actually, I can fact check
Yeah,
that. It's so funny. I think I've edited at least 3 of our episodes where you say trans
that's
tax.
hilarious. Yeah, because it's a big thing.
It's a big
It is.
one.
And it's, if you're only listening to this episode, here's what it is. And if you're a longtime supporter, thank you for showing up and listening to me say the same damn thing over and over again. But it is that energy, time, and money go in to us being trans that cis people don't have to, whether that is money that we have to put aside for packers, binders, surgery, depending if your insurance covers your medication, how much are you paying? And therefore, you can't put that money towards getting an editor for your book or a producer for your song or new headshots. And there's also, I think, the idea of lost opportunity that I don't know if we've talked about as much with everything happening in politics. I feel like as film and TV actors, it's like New York, LA, right? And Canada. We're fine. Like, there's not yet a lot of stuff happening, but I shouldn't say that because there is a lot of film and TV in. Actually, I don't think that's true. I don't think there's as much in Georgia anymore. It's starting to leave to go to the UK.
Oh. Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. I also heard
Oh,
Mexico.
interesting.
Mexico City.
Yeah. Apparently, like,
But yeah.
rumor has it they don't want to pay for healthcare because, like,
Okay.
UK is universal healthcare. They also don't
Right.
have as strong, like, they have different unions. Like, they don't have SAG over there. Like, it's all equity.
Okay. Okay.
But if you're a touring artist, like a musician, a comedian, if you're in a theater show or a musical that's on tour, there's a chance like you have to go to states that you're like legally not allowed to use a certain bathroom.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, it becomes complex.
Yeah. And I hadn't really thought of that until I went to, actually, speaking of equity, when I was doing
Mm.
research, they actually have a page for their trans and non-binary members, and like what they're
Mm.
trying to do and different resources and stuff. And they do bring that up on there, and I'm like, oh damn, you're right. If you're on a touring show, like my buddy who's not trans, he's like the cissest headest man in the world. He's great, but he was like in the national tour of, I think, Elf, and I think they
Mhm.
went like in New York to like Pennsylvania, Michigan, to kind of down to the Carolinas, and I think, and they had queer people, of course, in the cast. I believe they had like your wonderful cishet friends who are like, there's a non-binary person or a trans person in my cast. He's also older, so give him a pass. But luckily, they're with a theater company. There's a bit of a safe space, but there is still the reality you have to go through the airport. Are you traveling? Are you
Oh, for
driving?
sure.
And there might be some comedians or people who are like, you know what, I'm not going to do this show because it's in a state that I don't feel safe in, or my fans won't be safe showing up to that.
For sure. I think that's a valid thing. Once upon a time, I did like I regional theater, so I would travel to different cities and do plays. And I remember I I always asked myself, like I think I did one in St. Louis, and then I auditioned for one in like I don't know, somewhere East Coast, but not like New York or like New Jersey.
Mm,
I don't know, but I was like, where is this? This looks like maybe it was like one of the Carolinas actually. So I don't know. But I asked my agents, like, okay, what's the culture of like where this place is, what this city is? Like, what's the diversity and inclusion,
Hmm.
equity inclusion of this theater. Like, I'm nervous. I don't know. I feel like the political landscape of this city or the state makes me nervous. Like, if I'm living there for 2 months doing a show, like, I want to feel comfortable, even if the theater itself is, with it. But that makes sense. Those are so
Yeah.
many things that I think you're right. Perhaps, I mean, when we talk about privilege,
Hmm.
in multiple ways, we can talk about privilege because I know there was another thing we wanted to kind of
Hmm.
plug about that. But like a lot of my cis counterparts don't have to experience that or even think about that. Maybe my fellow people of color might,
Hmm. Yeah.
like depending on where you're at. But there's layers, right? And I think that's the trans tax. There's just some additional layers,
Yeah. Because
possibly, that maybe we're carrying.
yeah, and I think too, some people might be like, "Oh, well, just stay on set or stay at the theater," and it's like, well, if you're living there for 2 months, you're just like, I guess I can never leave my hotel room. That's lonely. It's isolating. It's not healthy.
Right. Right.
And we're already dealing with like we talked about in Ryan's episode, like this massive emotional toll. This like we're getting hit with politically and socially on top of like regular people problems that we all have,
Just
just
life.
life. And that can really be a creative, like, damper.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe both. A hamper and a damper.
Yeah, because I think people, especially people who aren't in the industry, I think really don't understand how expensive it is to be an artist because we're all poor. They're just like, I don't know if they realize we're poor because we're spending so much money on this stuff. And I think that gets left out of the nepo baby like discourse because there's all these people defending nepo babies, going after nepo babies. My main thing with nepo babies is just like, okay, cool. Like if I'm sure if my parents could do it, they would. If I were to have kids, I'd do it too. No
Mm-hmm.
judgment. There's just the reality of like, yes, you got to pay, like your parents had the money and connections to get you the best classes in the world where there's other actors who had to choose between rent and an acting class or rent and
Yeah.
headshots. And that's
Yeah. It is access.
yeah, yes, that's a great way to put it. Access.
Yeah. That's just the reality,
Yeah.
right? You're right. And like we don't want to, poop on anybody about who lives what
Yeah,
life.
there's lots of great, I think Maya Hawke I mentioned earlier. She's great.
Yeah.
Love her as a person too.
Right.
Nepo baby. I don't care. Jamie Lee Curtis, Nepo baby, whatever. It's not about the fact like that happens everywhere. Like the partner at some law firm. That's why it's like Ebuchadnezzar, and Johnson are like the three partners. It's because they're father and son plus their cousin, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how law firms work. Maybe it's not a cousin.
Not Ebuchadnezzar and
I was
Johnson.
trying to think of non like I just like I guess I could have done it Scrooge, Marley, and Marley. That
That's
probably would have been.
hilarious.
But there is and then you add on to like the fact that trans people, especially trans women and trans people of color, are more disenfranchised, and
Mm-hmm.
it's harder to get jobs. But something that we were talking about, you mentioned with the privilege thing.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I say this at the top of every panel. We've said before, not all trans masculine people get masculine privilege. But I do think, and in a weird way, it's affirming, but I think also people forget that if we transitioned medically and then get masculine privilege, that means we did not have masculine privilege beforehand. And if
Mm-hmm.
someone's transitioning in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, they lived a long time not having access to masculine privilege. And I believe it was somebody on the first panel, way back when, the very first one, actually worded it as like AMAB privilege
Mm-hmm.
versus
Mm-hmm.
AFAB,
Mm-hmm.
but are the opposite privileges.
Yes, and so AMAB, not me being like, and we're gonna teach.
Here's the PBS
Look at me.
moment.
I can't break it. It's just that it's in my blood. AMAB is assigned male at birth. AFAB assigned female at birth.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so one could also, so I think something that gets left out, and like this kind of goes into the support thing, right? There are a lot of grants and programs that support women. That includes trans women, trans femmes, non-binary people, which is fantastic. I don't believe in scarcity culture. There can be programs for everybody. You don't have to take away a women's program to make room for trans men, right? We could just have another program, or you have like a little subset in your current one. I don't know. I don't run programs,
Mm-hmm.
but
Right.
because I was talking to somebody who is a DP, and there are trans DPs, but they're trans. They're mostly are trans women who are successful, and
Mm.
they moved up through the ranks when they were male presenting. And then,
Mm.
so this trans masculine DP I was talking about, he was struggling when he was female presenting, dealing with sexism in the industry. And then he transitioned, and then all the programs are for women, trans femmes, and non binary people. So, as a he, him trans man
Interesting.
who spent most of his
Uh-huh.
career hitting the glass ceiling, it's
Uh-huh.
assumed he's fine now, I guess, that he has his privilege and he can break
Oh.
in, right?
Okay.
And so I think this idea of there's AFAB people, I guess depending on what age you transition,
Mm-hmm.
there is, and like for example, they say quote unquote women's health, right? There's hardly any research in it.
Mm-hmm.
Trans masculine people also need that same type of health care, you know? And
Totally.
so we're
Right.
both impacted, both different groups of people are all 37, there's a spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
are impacted by the lack of funding for AFAB oriented health. And so I feel like sometimes people forget, they look at least me, I'll speak to my experience, and they're like, well, you're fine. You're a man. You've like gone up, like you've dealt with stuff. I'm like, cool. I transitioned like 4.5 years ago. I spent the majority of my
Yeah.
adult life not being perceived this way.
Right.
And, you
Right.
know,
We didn't, that wasn't the life we lived.
yeah,
Because that's same for me. I medically and socially transitioned in my mid 20s.
yeah. And again, that's wonderful that there are programs to help people who have like hit the glass ceiling, who need more resources. It's just transmasculine people, like in binary, he, hims, have also maybe hit that glass ceiling and also need support. But then it becomes a thing of like, can't we apply to it?
I get that. It begs that question of where do I belong?
Yeah,
I get that.
yeah,
Almost on the flip side, I feel like I don't belong in non binary spaces. Because, like, I feel
uh,
like because of how I look, I'm immediately
mm,
gonna be assumed that, yes, I'm a man. And if you know I'm trans, you're probably gonna think I'm a trans man, he, him.
yeah,
But I'm not.
yeah,
Trans masc, non binary. But yeah, that's the other thing we talked about too. Remember, like the non binary of like, what is non binary? What does that look like? And it seems
right.
like a very limited definition, but same things for trans men. It's like, again, where do we belong then? Where can we go? Where is it all right to take up space?
Yeah. And there could be like maybe, and like you said, that like I just create a whole narrative in my head, like a story where it's like, okay, let's say like you're like, hey, I feel like I would be great for this. I know you support women, trans feminine people, non binary people. I'm a trans man. Is there space for me?
Mm,
And they could be like, actually, heck yeah. Like the people are great. And then you go to the
right.
Zoom meeting.
And you're the only person with a beard.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
kidding.
you're the only person with a beard, you got the deep voice, and people are like, "Oh, are you an admin? Are you here?" Then it just becomes a thing
Right.
of like,
What is this man doing here? Does it
mm,
become a threat?
yeah,
Is it I get that. Oh, it's
yeah. And
complex
yeah, which
again.
which is valid, right? Like a lot of like feminine like presenting people, feminine identifying people need a break from men, whether they're trans or
Right.
not, right?
Totally. Totally. There is validity in that.
Yeah.
And why I could see why some programs are very maybe strict or yeah, specific.
Yeah.
But that's why I like that like AFAB. Like is it language that we need to like
Mm,
finagle and work with?
Yeah, it
So
becomes
people, we can be
difficult, right?
clear.
Because if you get too
Yeah.
specific, you're like AFAB people, then like trans women can't, right? And
Right. And then you're, oh,
then
see?
you're like, yeah, yeah. So it gets like, because
Yeah.
I mean, I saw that with someone who was trying to define the word lesbian, because
Okay.
this is like a side tangent, but there are some people in the lesbian community who do not like it when other queer women use the term.
Hmm.
I think they look at it as weakening it, or if it gives like men, cishet men, this like, oh, well, she said she was a lesbian, but I hooked up with her. And it's like, because that was actually a pansexual woman who used the term lesbian. Allegedly. I don't know. This sounds like
Okay.
a man like problem, not a bisexual, pansexual problem.
Okay.
But as the person kept trying, I just kept asking, I'm like, so what's lesbian then? And they're like, women who love women. I'm like, okay, so like, does that include trans women? They're like, and they're like, women identifying this. I'm like, well, what about the non-binary lesbian? They're like, they kept trying to. I'm like, what about the he him? Like, what about like this? It's just like
Right.
the more they try to get, it's like they had to then have this like,
Yeah.
10-page definition of being a lesbian to be able to include everyone without offending people, to say like, not people who aren't attracted to women, like, or like, because if you're like only people attracted to
Yeah.
women, then that includes men. Like, it's
Right.
just,
Oh
and so
gosh.
I think
Yeah.
it does become hard when you try to quantify it. And like, I don't want an organization to like
Yes.
feel like they have to take that away. But, and again, it's this idea of like, there just needs to be more. There can be another support
More. There you
without taking
go.
away from
Another.
trans women or
Yes.
cis women or non-binary people or femme present. Like, we don't have to take away from anybody just to create more space.
Of course. Absolutely. I like that. It's
Mhm.
adding, really. Not taking away, not replacing.
Yeah,
Adding.
exactly. Because
I
there's just
like
like
that.
stuff that's specific to trans math. I mean, we have talked about the voice from here to Timbuktu and back,
Yes.
but when I was in a trans choir, and a lot of people are being like, well, you'll just end up being a baritone. There's no offense to baritones like at all that I am giving as a tenor, which I know can be very contentious, but I'm just like, my type isn't tenor, my voice isn't baritone.
Mm.
But I realize though it is hard to be like a tenor or soprano without training. Like, there's a certain level of like vocal gymnastics needed to hit certain notes of what is now defined as the tenor range. It just like
Okay.
the female presenting voice got really crazy high when Legally Blonde the musical came out, and then they're like, we'll make men insane too. But there was no support. There was no understanding. Like, when I joined, there wasn't at the time anybody in leadership who had a voice on testosterone. There was no
Ooh.
understanding. As much as I kept trying to explain it, I was kind of met with like, oh, we know more. We've been in. I'm like, but you don't have a voice to transition. So there's just literally not support for, whether they're I'm sure like
Right.
a voice actor or a singer, musician, theater, what have you. Well, there's just
Mm.
other needs that come along that I think people forget about,
That's a good point.
because they look at us and they're like, yeah,
What?
especially like
Yeah.
me and my pale Persianness. I even look white. They're like, that's just a white man, right? Like, he doesn't need anything.
Yeah, interesting. So, right, the support isn't there. And so then that's really then like how do we one get it's like getting training to or education to be in those roles and be in those positions. I don't know, talking about like voice stuff. I loved again, I think we've talked about this organization too, but QueerVox, LGBTQIA plus like database, a voiceover database. They have classes and there's a Discord and workshops or things like that. But I taught a co-taught a class as like a voice actor, as someone in the industry in the voiceover world, but I partnered up with a speech pathologist who was trans masculine,
Oh, cool.
and he's studying that work, doing that work, and he's transmasc and has transitioned himself
Hmm.
medically.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was the coolest thing and the coolest experience to offer something like that.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I think it's something where it's having more opportunities like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and knowing like there could be a totally other different program. Maybe it's a voice actors group or something where they can then, we don't have resources, but they can be like, hey, Queerbox, can we partner with you to offer this? Or can we at least put you as like a referral if people are looking for something, right?
Yes. Even if it's that, even if it's like maybe an organization not being able to provide the actual resources, support, or training, but like, here's a list of places
Hmm.
you can go that we can vouch for if you want to seek that out, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's something subtle like that, just having like a list of
Yeah.
options and things to look up, places to go. I feel like that happens so often sometimes with like even my like from doing the owl house and like people, young people or trans mask people or non-binary people just reaching out and being like, do you have any resources, you
Yeah. My
know? And I'm just like, where's my list?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, my singing teacher actually, I think, has two other trans mass students
Yeah.
who just DM'd me. I've never met before.
Aw.
And they were like, because I've posted some videos of me singing, and I was like, yeah, she was great. I
Yeah.
really love about her. She educated herself,
Mm-hmm.
and like she's super knowledgeable about the voice anyway. And like we learned together as we
Yes.
went through it. And then now I like she has multiple people I've never met who just DM'd me. I was like, yeah, I recommend her.
I love that. You said
Yeah, but
something. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, you go
No, I
ahead.
was
You
going to say you said something about teaching herself. I just feel
go.
like that is like true allyship. Like really taking it upon yourself to educate yourself um and do that work.
Yeah, y- yeah,
That's
and I
cool.
think for I'm like, what's the target demographic of this podcast? I'm like, who's listening to it? Because I think there are, I'm sure there's like an actual term, but there are people whose job it is that people hire to be like, are we accurately representing people in this like script? I believe it was the American Muslim. I don't remember the name, but there was a Muslim organization that actually worked with Disney on Aladdin, the live action. And that's one of the
Ah.
reasons it's actually
Okay.
like pretty good representation. That again, not a lot
Okay.
of Middle Eastern, like good Middle Eastern representation, but they worked with another group. That group might have like contacted them and been like, hey, we heard you're doing this. We need to make sure this is like gonna be like appropriate and good. And my dad, who doesn't
Mhm.
like musicals, he loved it because he got to see versions on screen,
Oh
and in
yeah.
a way that celebrated our culture, which is full of dancing and color and food and music. It's just so vibrant and
Mhm.
rich, and like we never get to see Middle Eastern culture like that. So it took another organization. So it's, if anybody's listening who isn't trans masker, wants to find ways to help support, like maybe somebody who has an acting studio or a writing workshop, you know and they need more representation, encourage them to reach out, because there are groups that are more than happy to, whether you pay them to do a workshop or they can give you some resources to help you go down the right path of self-educating yourself. It's there. These exist, and ideally you paid a
Yeah.
trans person to do it.
Correct, right? Yes. Yes. Compensate. Compensate, but the
Ah,
consultants really,
yes, that elusive
right?
word. Yeah. You know what's also
Yeah.
funny is, not funny, but the other thing that kind of gets me about some of the grants and programs is that they're
Ah.
all for like 18 to 24. That's
Oh.
like really a specific age range. It's not 25. It could be 25. I think it's probably before healthcare it kicks in of some kind.
Right.
And it's interesting because you know, trans aside, a lot of people go through career and life changes. There are probably a lot of people, like, there's people in my acting class who have been doctors and this and that. And, like, yes, they have the finances because they had a career that made a lot of money. But there are been people who later in life are like, hey, I want to go down this career path. And there's no support. Like, I remember I was just trying to find like producing programs that were affordable so I could learn more. And there is nothing that was either affordable, or that's not true. The Santa Monica College has a producing class that was recommended to me. It just the commute as a working adult was not doable.
Yes.
But I think too of, trans people generally. A lot of us who transitioned older, like that's a big shift, and like there could be other things that come of that shift. Perhaps maybe somebody who was dealing with dysphoria or saving up for it, or they just didn't have that connection to self or confidence. They transition. They're like, you know what? I also want to go for this other dream of mine. Or now I understand, like I'm more
Mm,
connected to who I am and I want to get into an artistic endeavor. If they don't have a ton of savings or the money or the resources, that's it. There's nothing like there's no group there, like there's no program being like you're 50, we'll help train you. And one of my friends morbidly was like the reason is because they want to see you're an investment, and the younger you are, the longer you'll be in the workforce. Like if you're in your 30s, like if you especially your 40s,
aha.
50s, 60s, you're not working that much longer. It's not worth their
Yeah.
investment.
Oh, wow. Oh, no,
Yeah,
you're
okay.
old, crusty, and
Yeah.
dusty.
It starts at 25, people. Yeah.
Oh, that's awful. But you're right. You're right. The way it caters to a younger generation as an
Yeah.
investment. I get
It is
that.
hard,
And
especially,
that's
like, you
rough.
couple in, like,
Yeah.
the trans masc experience, like, then that as a female presenting person, maybe they had been making less due to the wage gap and the glass ceiling, and they don't have the savings, and then they transition, and then they don't have the support, and then they're like, "Well, you're a man, you're fine."
Right. That assumption. Right. That's tough. Hmm. Mm.
Yeah.
Well, also, I did some research too.
Hey.
Poked around a bit. No, it wasn't a study, but it was a article on this website that's kind of like Substack, but
Mhm.
it's called The Present Age, I think. Unless this is their Substack called The Present Age. But anyway, it appears to be a writer, Parker Malloy, who I'm going to say is trans because they're referring to speaking saying us as trans folks. But anyways, I thought it was interesting. They wrote about the title was The Media's Trans Problem. Everyone's talking about us, no one's talking to us.
Mm.
Which, as we know, like right now, we are the scapegoat. We are being, used, trans people, to really drive political, how would I say, like,
Yeah, unrest, discourse.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Um, but I thought that was a good point. And maybe that, like how we said, politics, it's related to forms of media, be it TV, film, books, music, on how all these conversations, like, everyone's talking about it. Everyone's talking about it. They're not trans, though. But everyone's talking about it. And, like, where are the trans people in those conversations?
Yeah. I think from the media in the sense of the news and politics, I think
Yeah.
that's very much on purpose, right?
Mm
Because
hmm.
if you sit like the average trans person, you sit them down, you're either gonna be like, that's a regular person, or you're like, that's a fabulous person, but they're still a regular person, right? But yeah, I do think that is a part of entertainment's problem when it comes to trans mass represent. I mean, that's kind of how the panel came to be. Is
Right.
the panels I saw specifically, there was no trans mask person on any of them,
Mm
and I was like,
hmm.
we're talking about queer representation in the arts, and we're leaving out an entire group of. Granted, you can't like have. I think that would
Yeah.
be a big panel to have someone representing every member of the alphabet mafia.
Correct. That becomes the dilemma,
Yeah.
right? It's like we can't. That's also complex. That's our word of the episode.
It is hard,
Complex.
but I did go to trans-specific panels, and one of them literally had I was like, "I feel like it's fine, we're trans. We can be like, there's the trans masculine turn out to be a butch lesbian." And I was like, "Well," and she, like, really made a point to be like, "I am not trans. She, her."
Okay.
And I was like, "Okay, well, honest," but I'm like, "You couldn't really? The trans panel? You couldn't find a." I
There was no, wait, let me get this right. There was not a single person that was trans on the
trans
panel?
mask, trans
Trans
mask.
mask.
That would be
Okay.
crazy.
I was
That
gonna
would be really
say.
crazy. No,
Okay,
there's
no
the
trans mask individual on the
yes,
panel.
no
Got it.
trans mask individual. Like there's no they,
No
them,
they them,
no he
no AFAB
they,
he him.
no he him he they he. Like
Nothing.
nothing. Yeah, and I was like, this was so. And I even saw like two baby trans masks in the audience, and they're like still into it. But I was like, oh, they're like not seeing anybody like them.
Mm,
And
yeah.
again, I'm trans. I clock people. We can do it. If you're cis listening to this, you cannot tell. You cannot think it to say it. No, it's fine. It's not fine. I'm
But
just
sometimes
razzing.
sometimes you're wrong.
Yeah,
So we still can't assume, yes.
we can't. I went based off the trans bandana and the top surgery scars I saw poking out. So I
Oh,
think even
okay.
yeah.
All right, fine,
I
fine.
think or the binder I saw, I was like, I think even a cis person can be like, yeah, I know. That's can you imagine like the
Oh,
you can't clock
jeez.
anybody and it's like they're hitting in the face with a trans flag and you're like I don't see color, I don't see transness. It's
Oh
like
no.
no.
I get it, but I love that what you said was like it was revealing, and
Yeah.
it inspired you to create these the panels.
Hmm.
Yes, the
Yeah.
transmasculine representation in entertainment panels.
And I also get it, right? We're a minority of a minority, and then when it comes to representation, trans masks are even more of a minority. But again, like so there may not be possible to have a trans mask person in every single room, but that doesn't mean we can't try, right? We can't make that the goal. And also you can hire a consultant, like you said the word earlier.
Right, but it's like I think the challenge now too is the barriers and the blocks from
Yeah.
even being able to like cross the line of like, okay, I apply, but am I going to be hired? Oh,
Hmm.
maybe not. And
Yeah.
why? Because
It,
businesses, companies, corporations, studios, they're scared, right? No, am I? Maybe I don't want to be
yeah.
speaking wrong.
No, I think you're right. And I mean maybe this is the time to use the stealth power to like sneak in, finally get some of this audacity, I guess, that comes with being a
Right,
man. Don't think I've fully gotten it
right.
yet. Sneak in, change from within, espionage,
That's
transmask
real. I
espionage in the
know. And
industry.
you know what? I've been wrestling with that a lot with like, because listen, like we said, we're actors, we're performers, we're in the arts. This is a choice. And sometimes it's not always feasible, and you're not always making your income from that work. But I'm in a transition
Hmm.
of like being like, okay, you know what? I do need consistent income. And I wrestle with like, do I include my pronouns? Do I out myself as trans? Like, asking myself those questions, the part that's winning is still like, well, I want to be somewhere where I'm gonna be seen and affirmed and valued. I don't want to
Hmm.
have to hide parts of myself. But you made a good point too, though. Like, but what if, right? Like, I'm not putting those things out there, but also you could look me up. That's the other thing. Like,
Yeah.
online is such a resource, obviously, especially for job applicants.
Right. Yeah, people do their work, and that is another part of. I don't think it's a tax per se, but an element of like the industry and other industries. I guess we can say they're all industries
Yeah.
have shifted to checking social media, and I think especially whether you're an actor or a musician or a comedian, people look at your following. They're like, "Can you get butts and seats?" Right? Or you're selling a book, like well, not you being the book seller, you're an author. That's the word. People that could be something we find out with our author coming on. Do people look at the following to make sure they can move units, right?
Mm.
And social media has become a part of being in the entertainment industry. And with that, it's like, well, if you're out as trans on social, I kind of feel like it's a little Pandora's box. Like once you're like out online, you're out.
Exactly.
And then it could be like, well, what opportunities are you losing because
Right.
but there also could be opportunities that you might be missing because you're not out.
Correct,
Like
right?
we
It's
talked
like
with
that
AJ. It's a really it's
double-edged sword.
yeah, it could be a win-win or a
Yeah,
lose-lose depending if you're a glass
right,
half full or empty
right.
person.
And I guess at the end of the day, you need to listen to your gut and your instinct and do what feels good, I
Yeah.
guess, and feels right. And
Yeah, and thankfully, and I guess that could be some like Los Angeles privilege, California privilege, and entertainment
right,
industry privilege
yes,
is like, you
safety.
know, their safety. Yeah, their safety in being out. Of course, like you said, the job application process, you can't prove people are discriminating. Once you're hired, then you can then do it, then you can sue them if there's
Right,
discriminating, right?
right.
But you remember we met that person who we won't name for obvious reasons at the Invisible Men's gathering who works in the government, and he
Yeah,
can't be out online.
I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Right,
won't give any other details because of that, but it is something where it's another barrier that trans people of all under the entire umbrella face. And I do love that a large marching theme, if that's even a way to say it, on our podcast is being authentic to yourself, being true
yeah,
to who you are. And that might mean you post a lot of trans activism stuff on your Instagram, then Disney doesn't want to put you on the Disney Channel because some moms are gonna, whatever that mom group is gonna protest the show. Like that might be that you don't get that opportunity. But like you said, if that's something you're passionate about, there's plenty of people who are here and there to support you.
right. And it makes me think of, again, like championing people who are making their own work
Hmm.
and including this representation. We said that like the indie scene, the way it really is booming right now. But again, I think also the resources. I love that. I think you have a little list of some things that,
I do. I have
yeah,
a few things. Some of these I stole from Actors Equity. Like I said, they have a trans non-binary resource page. They have things on there like the HRC Human Resource Campaign state legislation map, so you can know like what's going on in the state you might have to go to for creative engagement, as well as the trans legislation tracker. Something I thought was really cool is they have a link to, it's called a Queer Liberation Library. It's a digital library that has more queer centered literature and community resources, which I think is really cool because, if you're, whether you're a college, a high school, community theater, or like you're just an up and coming theater company that wants more queer works to do, it can be hard. I found that as an actor, it can be hard sometimes to find new playwrights if you're not
right.
in the circles of people who know.
Oh my gosh, sorry, I just
Um,
got triggered of like a monologue. I need a monologue
yeah,
for
I
my
know.
audition.
I
Where's
thought
the
that too.
non-binary, genderqueer, trans mask monologues?
I know. I'm probably good at be auditioning for this theater company, Theater of Note, and I was like, they need monologues. I was like, monologues in LA? What do you mean? Like literally, there's a musical theater audition. I was too slammed anyway, and I kind of want to take a break from theater for the part of this beginning of this year. But I was like, I could just submit BC, and then it was like my song, and then it was a monologue. I was like, a monologue in
Yep,
LA?
it's part of theater.
I have done a lot of musical auditions that don't require
Well,
monologues.
musicals are different. They just need to
That's
know
what
if you
I
can
thought.
sing and if you can dance.
Just give me sides. Come on. Like,
But okay, back to the list.
yeah. Other things that are featured on the Actors Equity page is also the Native American Two Spirit Resource Guide. So there's also support that they're giving not just for the arts but for community as well. But some other things that people can check out that are arts specific is Sundance has a trans possibility initiative, so it provides trans filmmakers across all identities with mentorship, networking, and production support within the Sundance, community, which is also really great because I forgot what you were saying. No, that's not important. But something made me think about how the mentor part of like trying to move up in the industry, because having a mentor in any like field can be really great. I feel like people tend to find their mentors as like, there's things in common or they can help. I don't know. I just don't know how many like cis people are like, yeah, let me be the trans person's mentor. Like whether it's intentional or whether if they're like, oh, is this my place because I'm such an ally, I shouldn't be the one to
Oh my
like,
goodness.
you
Yes.
know.
Sorry, so many good things in what we're talking about right now. I thought of another. It can cuz oh wow. My brain was thinking so fast I couldn't get the words out. What's it called? Again, we can only speak from our own experiences, and sometimes we do have stories, right? Personal stories.
Mhm.
But the mentor thing, I remember when I first started audiobooks, which was with Cemetery Boys, and I was told by a producer, audiobook producer from that first book, that there was the APA, which is the Audio Publishers Association,
Mhm.
and it's a membership, so you had to pay, but they were doing like a diversity scholarship where you got a year free of being a member. And so I applied and I got it, and I had an opportunity to do like a speed pitch kind of 1 minute thing in front of audiobook producers and just kind of like introduce yourself, talk about yourself. And then another program they had was a mentorship, a new narrator mentorship program. And I applied twice and never got paired up with a mentor
Really?
because they said there wasn't anyone that fit my criteria that I was looking for.
Oh,
Which was like, I was like,
interesting.
I want a trans person or a non binary
Yeah.
person or a queer person to be my mentor. But instead, you know what has happened? It's like I've become the mentor.
I was gonna say it's you now. Yeah,
Anyways,
that's tough. I mean, yeah, because especially if you're like, this is specifically what I want, they're like, we can't help. There's just nobody here. It doesn't mean
right,
they didn't try,
right.
and
But then I think I even sent like a follow up being like, okay, actually, I don't care. They don't need, I just want someone seasoned who has been doing
yeah,
this. And I just want to learn and see what I can gain and grow, how I can grow as a narrator in this industry. But I don't know what happened, but it fell through. I don't know. But
yeah, you could have already been like flagged in their system as like, this is the requirement,
correct.
doesn't match. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's hard. Honestly, it makes me think of therapists where you're
Oh,
like, I
yeah.
would like
Yeah.
XYZ.
And we're like, we don't have that.
Right. And you're like, but there's also like, well, I need therapy either way, so just give
So
me
just give me
somebody.
anyone.
Yeah.
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 I get that. But I love that this, and Actors Equity, again, for listeners, it's the theater, actors, theater
Union.
union. Yeah.
Yes.
And so they have all these guides. So what did you do?
Yeah.
You just went
At
to the
least,
website and then,
yeah, I actually just Googled, I think, either support for trans artists or equity trans artists, something like that.
okay,
Literally, like, and then it popped up
nice.
um, as one of the pages.
Yeah.
And just Actors Equity is the in the US is the theater union, and the
Yes.
UK is both film and TV, I believe. They don't have SAG over there, I don't
I see.
think.
It's not separate.
Yeah,
Got
from
it.
my understanding, which is why like I've
Got
heard some
it.
things that aren't great. And why a lot of production might be going to the UK as well. Rumors, of course.
Right. So funny. There was another foundation that I learned about recently called Handy Foundation, and it has
Handy like a like an actual
handy,
like
like,
handy person.
yes, like a handy person. Yeah.
Mm.
Handy Foundation, creating pathways to opportunity. And they have training in jobs, advocacy, career support, mentor matching to build careers in the entertainment industry. So that was something I literally saw today, but I thought I'd
Oh,
throw it in there
yeah.
as another thing to look into for folks. But and I
That's
think they
awesome.
do cater to like you know marginalized communities and stuff like that. But
Mm. Yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
great.
I
And
don't know too much. Just yeah.
yeah. And for like there's I mean this could be a whole other episode on like getting a mentor because it's such
Yeah.
a thing, but that is something if you're listening and you're like, "Oh, how do I get a mentor?" or like, "Can I find a mentor?" or something. A lot of people like if you don't know them, they'll just reach out and be like, "We've never met, be my mentor." But I think there's more people in the industry than people realize who if you're like, "Hey, like I'm trying to become like an agent, like
Yeah.
you're in representation or casting, like, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Would you be down to meet? A lot of people are actually like, here's the thing, people love to talk about themselves, one, but there's more. If I like watch some sort of getting a mentor. I think I got certified in it, getting a mentor for like when I lost my mind and did like an MBA class for a second. um Look, we've all been through a lot recently. Um but just reaching out and being like, I admire your work. Are you down to talk? And I think people are more interested, like, people are more willing to help in this industry than I think people realize. Because I had a friend who, like, she did that. I mean, she's not in the industry anymore. So
Yeah.
she learned that this wasn't the industry for her, which
Mm-hmm.
is totally valid.
Mm-hmm.
But she reached out and she met with people, got like bought them a coffee and talked, and they gave what information or like support they could. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's eventually developing a relationship over time. It's actually funny. This just popped into my head. There is a thing too, I think, about with the mentor thing, like, because you don't have to be exact. My One of my friends, he's like a writer. He's been like script writer assistant, like on some big shows. But his mentor, like, my friend is like a 30s cis white man. His mentor is such an old woman. She's like the oldest of old ladies. So you could always find somebody who isn't exactly like you who can be there to help
Yes.
guide and support. And
Totally.
then, especially when your work is in a place, or the more, especially like if you're not in LA or New York or other cities that have big queer communities,
Yeah.
it can be hard to find trans people to work with. And I'm sure there's other programs as well. Maybe that could be a post we do of like, hey, like if you know of any resources that have helped. Because I know there is one for music. At least She Said So. Well, it's called She Said dot so. So instead of dot com, it's like dot so. There's a trans charter for the music industry, helps outline best practices for trans inclusion and things like that. And then there's the Transgender Film Center, which we mentioned the last episode, that the Duplass brothers were partnering with them for that found footage grant. And so there are things coming up. And I think that's also what's exciting, is that because there's now a gap, like because of politics,
Mm-hmm.
more, I think, people are stepping up and wanting to do this, right? Like Duplass has been, as we found out through AJ, quietly supporting trans filmmakers for a while. But
Mm-hmm.
this happened and he's like, we got to do something bigger, right? And then
Yeah.
like multiple editing BX companies wanted to come in. Like all of a sudden they have all these partners. They kept announcing new partnership. So it is exciting to see that there's more resources coming in and like more people want to like step up and help.
Yeah.
I think it's just, while we do it, maybe the language doesn't exclude trans masculine people.
For sure.
So, and I will say, like, when I was perusing, like, the Sundance one, I saw a mix of all types of identities and backgrounds and stuff. So I do think there is the space, but it also would be great if like there's only so many trans resources, right? It'd be great if there were more resources
Yeah.
that could be inclusive and supportive.
Yeah, because then it's like there's more of us than there are of these programs.
Yeah.
And I get it. That's good. Well, hey, here's to resources, okay?
Yeah.
And people doing
Resources.
what they can to help in that effort. I think that's huge and appreciated. But what about now, like as we wrap up, what, okay, let's talk about 5 years from now. Let's say we've moved, we fast forward, we're there, we're in the future. What's the kind of representation you would want to see?
I think outside of the regular, like, what are we seeing on TV, how often, and all that stuff, I think what I would love to see is that there are some trans mass specific support systems, which in this 5-year growth period maybe means that there are, like, picture it, 2031. Oh my God, that's crazy. Ugh. In the future, Xenon. No. But, in the future, maybe there are trans mass artists, whether it's Ryan or Brian. You know, they built up such a success that they can then like help fund these scholarships or these inclusion programs. I'd love to see the representation of trans masks being on board boards and fundraising and leading those conversations, you know, whether it's the person who's leading or teaching the conversation or even like what you're doing of like helping to teach a voiceover class. And I think that's the type of like representation is I think it's great to have the on-screen and the in the book and the music, but I think for this to be a long-term actual change, we really need a stable foundation, and that means having a trans mask creative director at Netflix.
Yeah, I am gonna have to agree with what you said. I've been thinking a lot about that recently, of also like being behind the scenes, being in leadership positions, being like where those conversations are happening, and truly like yeah,
Mhm.
infiltrating to to help change the trickle down effect, right? Like there's two forms of activism or work, I think, where it's like you start on the ground level, like what is it called?
Yeah.
Grassroots, like almost like on the floor, right? Ground, bottom, and trying to help change from the bottom up, or you get to the top somewhere and you're there to help it trickle down and help that change
Yeah,
bleed
and another,
into
I guess, program too, it made me think of Elliot Page's production company, which I believe is Pageboy.
yes, page boy.
They do take on so Tuck Dowry, who's the creative director, they mentor young trans people on producing, which that's important because it's one of those things where it almost makes me think of weirdly, it's like a cryptocurrency analogy. But they talk about like a whale, right? And maybe this applies to stocks too. I don't trade, so I don't know. But basically, like a whale is like a big shift, right? If a whale comes out of the ocean and splashes, it's this huge change that happens. And that's why people like crypto, is that it's super volatile. You can make a lot of money really fast, but you can also lose a lot of money really fast and not get anywhere. And so I almost feel like the idea of like we need like a really big trans name or like a TV show that puts like a mask actor out front and it creates a tidal wave, but eventually that wave goes away. And so I do
Yeah,
think it's yeah, we need the producer who is the studio head being like, let's just make this character trans mask because we can.
yeah, that's it. That's where we'll be in 5 years.
Because we have the opposite happening. I yeah. Ooh. We got a lot of work to do, guys. 5 years.
Totally. Yeah, I agree with that. And then,
And what about for you?
yeah, well, I think like I do agree with you. I feel like I share that sentiment and that feeling. Because again, it's a lot of what we said too, is like you're talking about the foundation needs to be in that place in order to us to see the product
Yeah.
of what we want to see on screen. And I know we're like really talking about TV and film, but yeah, those stories again, right? Where can we just exist?
Hmm.
Where can we be a lead? Like I loved what AJ said in our last episode around like the rom-com,
Yeah.
right? Like just being like a presence in a good story
Hmm.
and not having to sometimes again there's a win of like yes, like you're trans but playing a cis character, but I want to see someone trans masculine being trans masculine in that story, living as a trans masculine person in that story. But
Yeah.
I always say this, but the story has nothing to do with them being trans masculine, but the nuances that exist, the realities that exist that come with being a trans masculine person may be
Yeah.
peppered throughout this
I
story.
feel like you saying that. I don't know why something just like unclogged in my brain. And maybe everyone has noticed this but me. But I'm just like, I'm really like wowed by the lack of imagination cis people have. They're like the only way that we can have a trans person and show that they're trans is if it's a trans story. That's the only like that's really
Hmm.
how it's actually a little like mind blowing because I'm trans. My live-in girlfriend is also trans, so I'm like, we see trans people every day, right? Like we're just existing, doing nothing. We're just trying new recipes on
Yeah.
social media. You know, but
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just
So
like we obviously have the
true.
small comments or jokes or things like that, but at the same time, though, I can't blame them because it's like if I've never seen a film on Korean culture, of course, Parasite is going to be the most fascinating thing for the first 30 minutes where like nothing happens because you're like, oh, I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
this is how they lived. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for cis people to like be like, well, we can't have like a trans person. This is like, well, how do we show that they're trans? It's not about them being trans. And it's like, do they really think every day of our life is just solely centered on being trans?
Right. Of course. Of course. There's no imagination. There's no
Yeah.
creativity when it comes to telling trans stories, but trans mask stories specifically. I agree. But even with these barriers, I think we're both trying
Yeah.
to do our work in any way we can. And I think that's important.
Yeah. You I just had the thought where I'm like, it's funny, especially like they struggle with trans masks. I'm just like, just if they're post top surgery, just shirt off for like 2 seconds. Trans,
Right.
like easiest
True.
thing.
I mean, true, right? Like, I mean, well, because, I mean, well, talk about, remember, you were like, there's different forms of like bottom
Yeah.
surgery, but some people can do peri, some people do which is like
Yeah.
almost like liposuction, right? It's just like a tiny
Uh,
little,
they remove the nipple and then go
yeah,
through it for peri, and then there's the double incision, but then there's even
yeah,
anchors. There's all sorts of like
right.
different ways to have it. Well, there's actually the recent movie After the Hunt where there's a trans actor who takes his shirt off or their shirt off, and there's visible top surgery scars. And I was actually like, well, that's like such an easy way to just like plug in a trans mass person. The internet, like it was this tidal wave of like, oh my god, we never see top surgery scars on screen. And I was like, that's crazy.
That's
That
crazy, but that's huge.
yeah. Yes.
That's huge. Yeah.
So take a note, just like
There you
if
go.
they're comfortable with it
If they're
and
comfortable,
they have
right.
top, because obviously you can't ask in like the audition, like, well, I guess probably film and TV, they probably are allowed to be like, we need to see you shirtless, right? There's too many people on shows that their entire like characters based on having abs. But you can't ask obviously if a trans person
we
has top surgery scars.
Fair,
Yeah.
fair, fair. But it's like, maybe you read the script, maybe it was in the script, and maybe the actor knows ahead of time, and who knows? Who
Maybe in
knows,
the
right?
breakdown,
Yeah.
you know?
Mm-hmm. There might be like nudity.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, there's ways to do it in a way that doesn't totally center us, but again, it goes back to if there's not either representation already there for cis people to learn from or a trans person in the room to tell them, or if they just don't know a trans person in their life, you know, like this is kind of a parallel, but my friend I was talking about, he worked on I Love LA and they needed a Persian last name. And so they go to a doctor that has my last name. And then it's even on like the set
No.
dressing in the back and everything. I thought I was having a stroke because I've never heard my name outside of a family member. And I was like, what? I was like, and they said it how we say it too, because they will like look to him, they're like, how do you say it? I was like, that's crazy. So it was, yeah.
Okay.
It's a
That's a
win, right?
win.
But, that's some it's like we don't see the doctor, but, like, a little Mina they're, like, Persian, like, authentic,
It
unusual, but
is.
authentic Persian name, but it's just like, meeting somebody and getting to know people, whether it's
Yeah.
you just happen to befriend somebody or through film or TV or, educating or hiring a consult, there's ways to slip in representation without smacking
Yes.
people over the head with it.
Exactly, because I get it. That is the way that we learn too.
Yeah.
Like, I get that, right? So, wow. I think that was solid. We
Yeah.
had a great conversation. And I'm just glad that, one, we shared resources, and two, like, I'm gonna keep being hopeful for the future, and I'm gonna keep fighting, and I'm gonna keep watching trans mask films, whatever ones I can find, and watch trans masc shows and trans masc listen to trans masc music and read trans masc books, and hopefully I will solve it all. I'm just kidding.
Avi's got it, guys. We're good. Me and peace out now. No, but I agree. And I know this isn't our first episode of 2026. I was like, wait, what year is it? Technically, like it's not the first one that airs, but it's the first one we're recording in the new year. For reference, it's the January 10th for listeners. And I think going into this year, having had so many great people just, on previous panels and then on the podcast, I'm like, there's a lot of people who are excited about the future and who are ready to do the fight. And there has to be so many more too. And there's going to be some great things like the Joy Who Lived Trans Festival that's happening, I think, end of March, early April.
Yes, here in Los Angeles.
Yeah. That's going to be helping produce and showcase so many trans artists. And that's like the umbrella of trans, of course. But it is something where I'm like, people are ready, they're willing and able. So, well, able, we're working on the able part, right? Like, this is what the episode's about. But I'm actually feeling excited about this year and seeing, the more amazing stuff that, like, not just us, but what our guests are also aiming towards.
I agree. Our friends, our colleagues, or just people, near and far, wherever you are, you have our support. And yeah, well, I think that's it.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
This was a great conversation. Bye.
Bye. Next time on In Full View, we're sitting down with Charlie Haino, a two-time Artios award-winning casting director and gender consultant who's been shaping Broadway, television, and queer-centered theater for years. Charlie gets into the craft of casting, what makes actors stand out in the room, and how you can make your casting breakdowns more inclusive for trans actors. If you liked this episode, leave us a review and share it with a friend. See you next time.